right. Good morning, everybody, and a good Erev Shabbos. There tends to be a very big hot-button issue about this Shabbos. It's in various, mostly Hasidic circles, but not only Hasidic circles and not all Hasidic circles. There tends to be customs to mark something special about the way the challah is prepared on this, the first Shabbos after Passover, the first Sabbath after Pesach. I got that backwards, right? Not reading from a teleprompter. So anyway, the most well-known of these various folk customs, folk practices, which could technically, if you want to get into how things are called in the academic world, these could even be considered to be forms of folk magic or ritual magic. Particularly, the one that we're going to mention first it's called the Shabbos of Schlissel Challah. Schlissel is, of course, the German and Yiddish word for a key, and challah we know is the bread that's generally in the scripture. The word challah is translated as a cake. Generally, what it means is the bread that we give a portion to the priest in the ancient times, and now we just remove it from the dough and destroy it. We burn it. And so it means the key challah, the key bread. So what does that mean? What is Schlissel Challah? What is this? So I know of at least 4 different customs of how one performs this, I would say, ritual magic of the Schlissel Challah. I don't mean that it's kishuf, I don't mean it's forbidden form of sorcery, but it is what, again, academically we could call ritual magic. I'm not saying that necessarily in a negative way, but I'm going to explain a little bit what that means also. So the 4 different various practices that I've heard in various communities, and in our house we do actually all 4 usually. Actually, I can think of 5. The one that I first saw, and also I would say seems in a certain way to be the most magical of all of them, in that sense of what it means ritual magic. One pierces a challah with a key, and really the typical way to do it is that when you make the dough, and what most people do is they'll wrap the key in some aluminum foil and stick it into the dough and bake it like that with the key in the dough. I first saw it by my local Rav, who was not particularly a Hasidish Yid. His father was Hasidish, but he learned more in the Litvish world, and he had influence both from Hasidim and Litvish and Litvaks, and sometimes what he would do is, even if you buy a challah from the store, he'd stick the key into the challah, and then they'd put it in the oven for a minute or 2 to kind of just bake it in there as well. That was what I saw by our local Rav here, Rabbi Fishbane Shlita. He should be well for many, many more years. The next thing that I've seen is that you make the challah itself, the whole dough, in the shape of a key. Another version of doing it is that you imprint the key, instead of piercing it, on the side into the dough, so that it should leave a mark, and when it's baked you have the shape of the key like that. Or you take a small piece of dough and form it into the shape of a key and stick it onto the regular challah. And then there's another version of doing it, which is the custom of the Nadverner Rebbes. I guess it was Mordechai Nadverner who had this custom, very interesting custom, is to take the dough and make basically a matzah, make it flat and round. And we know, when you bake matzahs, you pierce holes into the matzah, but they usually do it with, some kind of a long rolling pin that has a lot of points on it, something along those lines to make sure that the matzah doesn't bubble up. Although some of the Yemenites have a custom not to do that, whatever it is, most of Klal Yisrael, that's how we make matzahs. So this is not a kosher Pesach matzah. I usually make one like this, and we use the regular challah dough. But this is also a very magical type of, like ritual magic type of a thing, is you take the key, and I've heard that it should be the key to the Aron Kodesh, if the Aron Kodesh is a key. The key to the ark where the Torahs are held, if one has such a key. And you recite, there's a prayer, liturgical prayer from the Jerusalem Talmud that a lot of people recite, especially Hasidim and Sfardim, recite Saturday night, Motzei Shabbos, and even in other communities they also recite this prayer. And it mentions, I don't remember, maybe 70 different gates that are open, that we pray that God should open these gates of prosperity, gates of blessing, gates of life, and it's in the alphabetical order in Hebrew. So it's Shari Ora, Shari Yechim, Rishonim, Shari Chesapayim, Shari Bracha, Shari Vina, Shari Gila, Shari Gula, Shari Gvura, Shari Ditza, Shari Dea, Shari Hoy, Shari Hodar. We say this every Motzei Shabbos. So we take that prayer, we take that prayer and we pierce the matzah, the dough, with the key every time, kind of like we're using the key to open the door to the gates, that we're asking God to open the gates of these various blessings that we're requesting from God. And so and then you bake that matzah that is pierced, these was about 70 times, with these various gates that we're reciting while we pierce the dough. And those are all the various versions I know of the Schlissel Challah. In other communities, there are different names. In a lot of the Polish communities, they wouldn't maybe call it Schlissel Challah, but it was Shabbos Gele Challahs, the Sabbath of the yellow challahs, or Shabbos Gele Matzahs, or the Shabbos of the yellow matzahs. And a lot of people, when they make challah, they'll take egg wash and brush it on the challah, and this way it gives it a nice golden sheen on the challahs. A lot of people do that all year round, and it seems that in Poland it was, even though a lot of people will do that every Shabbos, but it seems that there was such a thing that particularly on this Shabbos, the Gele Challahs, the Shabbos of the yellow challahs, to do that, or like I said, Shabbos Gele Matzahs, that either you're making a matzah like we mentioned in the Nadvorna Minig, or you take the matzah left over from Pesach and also give the egg wash and bake it. So we usually do that as well, that even if we don't every Shabbos do the egg wash, even though I identify more with my Hungarian lineage of my mother's father's side, but my mother's side were Polish, and of course also my father wasn't Jewish, but I have a Polish name. because of my Polish ancestry. But we tend to do all of these things. We'll egg wash the matzahs this Shabbos, and also I'll take some of the challahs, and we'll also take some of the matzahs left over from Pesach and do the egg wash on the matzahs and bake them also, which is a kind of an interesting thing to do. And then additionally, so that's pretty much all of the different practices for this very special Shabbos. Now, I know a lot of people feel that all of these things are pagan. They find some, what I would call, there's such a thing in biology called convergent evolution. Convergent evolution, an example would be, the most obvious example would be that how flight developed independently at least 4 times in evolutionary biology according to the theories, and we know of 3 that exist now and 1 from the fossil record of animals that the evolutionists do not see any particular lineage that is common to these 4 separate groups other than the common lineage either in the 3 cases of all vertebrates, or in the other case, the 4th case, of all animals, or all biological existence, all life, is that you have the flying insects, you have the pterosaurs, you have birds, and you have bats. And these are not related, these lineages are not related more than any other. And yet, independently, they all developed flight. According to, as we would say, Lafishi Tosam, according to their mythology that they have in evolutionary biology and how they understand the world. So, what it means is that there's no direct relationship biologically between a bird and a bat just because they happen to fly. Right? Despite what it would seem, looking at scripture, the way things are defined, which are not being defined in any biological sense, and again, it's not even that clear that the animal that's translated as a bat is actually a bat. It could be something else. But in any event, the word oaf doesn't necessarily mean bird. It means winged creatures, flying creatures. And so, therefore, a bat would be considered oaf, even if it's not a bird, even if it's not an ornithological, it's a mammal. So in any event, let's get back to what we're saying. What I'm saying here is that there are those who claim, and people who I respect very highly, who claim that particularly the practice of baking a key into the challah is somehow either pagan or Christological, particularly because a lot of the keys in the ancient times were, or not even in medieval times, or in even post-medieval times, even to modern times, would have the symbol of a cross on it, which has obvious Christological elements to it. And then that there's also some will say it's around the Easter tide, and that to have the key rising up out of the challah is emblematic of the rising of Oisa Ish, of who, that person. So the thing is that most of these references that I've seen are either Latin American or Irish. And so for that reason, and some of them are fictional. And so for that reason, it's very difficult to say that this is a direct, since these are communities that didn't have, meaning if it was something that you could show in an Eastern European community, then there could be more of a causation rather than a mere correlation. But rather it seemed to be some kind of like I was making the mashal there, making the parable, that is some sort of convergence that's not necessarily related. And maybe not even actual convergence at all. However, some of these same rabbis I know will point out even the practice of braiding challah seems to be of a Christological origin. But in any event, the one thing I would say is that we have tzaddikim that we respect, including these rabbis respect, who had this practice. Particularly the fact that both Munkach and Satmarov had these practices. Right, if I adjust the heat, it starts clicking, so I have to. So I'm saying that Munkach particularly was always trying to get to what is original. He was very much an originalist. And I'm pretty sure that in Munkach they have the Schlissel Challah. It would be hard for me to imagine they don't, although I'm not actually aware of that. But I know for sure that the Satmarov, based on what the Abderov, other tzaddikim taught, that they would have this practice of the Schlissel Challah. I think Satmarov actually did, like I said, he both pierced the dough, or the Rebbetzin did, and also made shapes of the challah. I think he did both. I'm not sure exactly. So, and I find it hard to believe that the Satmarov, who was so careful to avoid anything that was kfira or avodah zarah, he distanced himself so far from all of these types of things that he would follow a practice, even if it was a familial practice, that had any, we could say shemitz avodah zarah, that had any even inkling of paganism or heresy, etc., because the Satmarov was extremely careful about that. And also the Satmarov did not always follow familial customs if he had a personal reason to change it. One thing, I mean, this is a rather minor thing, but there's in a lot of the Hasidic circles, you'll see in the Nusach Sfard Sidurim, that before the Psukei de Zimra, there will be there'll be Psalm 15, which is not like an integral part of the Psukei de Zimra, and also the hymn Yedid Nefesh. And some people say neither, some say one or the other, and some say both. I don't remember offhand which one the Satmarov said. If I'm not mistaken, I know the Satmarov didn't say both. I think he just said Psalm 15. And if I'm not mistaken, and it could have been that he said Yedid Nefesh and not Psalm 15. Let's just, for the sake of argument, say he said Psalm 15. And his father, the Kedushas Yontiv, the Sigad Rav, said Yedid Nefesh. And then his grandfather, meaning his father's father, the Yetiv Lev, said the Psalm 15. So they asked Satmarov, the Rebbe's father said, Yedid Nefesh, why do you say Psalm 15? Why do you say Mizmor David? And he said, I do follow why don't you follow your father's minhag? He said, I do follow my father's minhag, because my father changed from his father's minhag, so I'm changing from my father's minhag. This is a type of sense of humor that Satmarov was legendary for. Similarly, perhaps even more radical than that was that that he changed something in the midst of his life. When Satmarov went to visit Eretz Yisrael, and he was very impressed by the custom in Eretz Yisrael. I'm talking back in the 20s. He visited Eretz Yisrael. He was very impressed by the minhag Eretz Yisrael of duchening every day, of reciting the Birkas Kohanim, the Kohanim Oila L'Duchen B'chol Yoim, and he so he changed his minhag in his Beis Medrash when he had his own Beis Medrash, that on not only, which a lot of people have a minhag, and I think it wasn't even his personal minhag before that Shabbos Chol HaMoed, that is not Yontiv, that the Kohanim should duchen. That's one thing that he did. But the other thing that I think was even much more much more radical, is that he went as far as that on Hoshana Rabbah, the Kohanim should go up to duchen. And I believe that that is, from all the things that you could say, that's the one thing that you could say is really a Satmar minhag, meaning a minhag of the Satmarov, that is totally unique among Ashkenazim in Chutz La'aretz, is that the Kohanim should be oiled duchen on Hoshana Rabbah. I don't know any other kehillah that does that, although kehillas that were influenced by Satmarov, sometimes even if it's not the minhag. I know, like, a friend of mine has a shul in Monroe, Spinka Shul, and the Kohanim, they were duchen not because it's Spinka minhag, but because it's in Kiryas Yol and everybody wants to follow Satmar minhag, that type of a thing. So, with that being said, and other things that the Satmarov didn't do, even if maybe it was a common minhag, and even as a minhag in the community, things like I don't know, saying the Haggadah on Shabbos HaGadol, or saying Shir Shirim Erev Shabbos, things like that, where Satmarov, he did not say the Haggadah on Shabbos HaGadol, as was the minhag of the Vilna Gaon, not to say it. And I, if I'm not mistaken, I think most of the Satmar Kehillah, they do say it, just because it's a common minhag of Klal Yisrael, even if their Rebbe didn't say it. These types of things. And again, saying Shir Shirim Erev Shabbos, even the Satmarov himself didn't do it. I don't really know. I think a lot of people do. A lot of people, it depends. They get to shul early, whatever. They looking for what to do. They say Shir Shirim. It's in the siddur. Things like that. So he wasn't, he didn't just blindly do things. He thought about everything he did. And so I would say, by virtue of the fact that the Satmarov did it, would mean that it's not prohibited. I'm not saying everybody has to do it. I'm not saying if you don't have a minhag like this, you have to do this. I'm just making an apologetic argument to say that it's not prohibited. You're not doing a sin if you do this. You're not committing idolatry if you place a key in the challah. Now the question is then, more generally, the whole idea of segulos, the whole idea of, what we say, good luck charms that are traditional in Judaism, and it seems that there's a difference between things that are not part of our tradition, a lucky rabbit's foot or something like that. Those type of superstitions are prohibited. Well, they're not ours. They don't come from our tradition. They come from other traditions. However, the other thing, these are heistes, I'm trying to think. The question though is what are we doing? So I feel like this. This is my personal hashkafa on this question. If you believe that putting a key in the challah is going to make you rich or going to give you parnasa, that is stupid, and it might be bordering on prohibited. But if you use it as a way to be creative in your devotions to God, like we mentioned the Nadverna Minig, that when you put the key into the dough, and they don't bake it into the dough, the Nadverna, and you recite a prayer while you're doing it, you're recognizing God, you're honoring God, even if it's in a kind of a strange, funny, weird way that we're not commanded. There's no source in Torah. There's no source in Chazal, in our sages, and there's nothing in the Talmud that points to something like this other than the